So we are live, Dr. Slaw.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for our, we got sort of in a tradition of doing these virtual coffee hours over the course of last year when we were in the midst of the pandemic. And I think we did about six of these sessions. We plan on doing a couple this year, one in the first semester and one in the second semester. And so this is our first semester touch base with the community. It's wonderful that we have access to technology and we've learned all these methods to really open up communication with their community. And so it's just a great tool and a resource, and one of the few good things that perhaps emerged from this pandemic. Again, thank you for joining us. I want to just start off this evening by acknowledging and recognizing the absolute horrific tragedy that transpired in Oxford. Our hearts and our condolences as a school community. You go out to the Oxford community. Many of our staff, many of our patrons that live within the community have ties to Oxford, and they hurt for those who are hurting in Oxford. I don't think anybody can imagine anything worse than going through the loss of a child and being forced to endure what the Oxford community has been forced to live through. So just to our Oxford community, we're thinking about you, and you are in our thoughts and in our hearts. So with that, again, welcome everybody. Looks like we have about 72, 73 people that are out there viewing this live on our YouTube channel. Just sort of setting up the way this works. We've been communicating for probably the last 3 weeks to a month that we're planning on doing this event, and we offered a link for folks that were interested to pose any questions. Kim has always done an outstanding job serving as our moderator, organizing those questions into themes, and then either asking me to answer some of those questions or she asking some of those questions. And there have been occasions when we've had other members of the COAT team here. Just looking at those questions, Kim didn't feel it was necessary to have anybody besides she and I, based on the categories of how those questions were thematicized. So that being said, I want to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Miss Kim Rutt, who is here with us. Kim, I'd like to turn it over to you for any beginning remarks, or if there's anything you want to say about how this event will work.
Well, Dr. Sly, you did a great job of that. I would just echo your sentiments in terms of the Oxford community, and its impact is far-reaching. We know that while Oxford has suffered the greatest of tragedies, we know it's not isolated in terms of its impact across Oakland County, across Southeast Michigan, across our state and across our country. And unfortunately, we've had to say and express our condolences way too many times in public schools or private schools or work settings or whatever, because this type of violence does exist. It would be foolish to think that it could never happen here. So as demonstrated by what happened in Oxford. And so we recognize that we have to be ever vigilant in terms of how we approach the security of our students and staff in Huron Valley. And I know it's been a focus for you, Dr. Salah, a focus for our board, and certainly a focus for me as it's represented in my title. So some of the questions that we will field tonight, some of the questions that have been initiated are safety related. And so I will likely pose the question and then answer the question as well. But we will jump right in unless there are some things that you want to touch on that have been on your mind other than the Oxford piece over the last week or so, or actually since the start of the first semester, really.
Well, just generally speaking, Kim, I would just say to our community, we thought coming off of last year that we could not have a more monumental set of challenges to overcome as a school district. But I will tell you that this year has been equally as challenging for different reasons and similar reasons. I mean, we still have the pandemic. We're still dealing with things like a mask mandate, as well as striking the right balance between what's best and most appropriate for quarantine rules and implementation that causes minimal impact on students and families. We're dealing with staffing shortages that we've never dealt with in the education community, certainly not in my career. And when I talk with folks that have served as mentors for me, they would echo that sentiment that in the last 50 years they haven't seen the staffing shortages that we're seeing. And then most recently, in the last couple of weeks, on the heels of the Oxford tragedy, we've been navigating yet again a set of circumstances that are unfortunately not uncommon in the wave of a school shooting aftermath. And because Oakland County happens to be the area where the shooting occurred, we're feeling it the most in Oakland County, and there's sort of this ripple effect outside of the county. So we've been dealing with an array of social media threats that began last week on Wednesday. We currently have Milford High School out on remote learning, started today. They will be out remote through tomorrow, just to give us an opportunity to wrap up some final details in that investigation. Families out there, you may or may not have heard that in Wayne County, they have arrested and charged at least 18 individuals. In Oakland County, we're at least at that number. In Huron Valley specifically, there have been 4 arrests associated with the behaviors of posing threats. And I just want you to know out there, families, that those individuals are going to be held fully accountable, not only by our law enforcement agencies and our courts, but also by the school district, up to and including maximum penalties, which could include expulsion. So we are taking these threats very serious. If you are a high school parent of a child on this call, that's where middle school, high school is where we've been seeing these threats. Please talk to your children. Tell them that these threats are not funny, whether they're intended to be humorous or just to get a pause on a school environment. Just won't be tolerated. It just causes way too much fear, anxiety, and disruption. I also want to assert that not a single one of these threats that have been levied has our law enforcement agencies have said they've been intended to cause disruption, and they had no validity, nor was there a plan or any way of actually carrying any of these things out. The most recent issue at Milford High School, spoke with law enforcement as late as this afternoon around 2:30, and they shared with me that they do not believe that threat has any credibility either, based on what they've investigated and what they've seen and what was written. So, although there isn't credibility, we have to do our due diligence, and so school tomorrow at Milford will be remote, as we bring some closure to that. So, Kim, I think that's it just for some opening comments. I know, the whole community sort of been on the edge of their seat over the last week and a half as we've navigated these threats.
Thank you, Dr. Sloss. So we'll jump into the questions. We have approximately 30 questions that I've categorized. Some are repeats, some follow thematic areas, and so I may address them sort of as a cluster of questions. The first set of questions really is regarding masking in our schools. And I will tell you, the questions ran the gamut from when are you going to do away with masks or allow them to be optional to when are you going to get serious about masks and require all staff and students to wear them. So as we have seen throughout this mask debate, if you will, or the questions around masks, we have people on both sides of this issue. Some who feel we're not doing enough with regard to masks, and some feel like we're overextending as it relates to masks, and we should allow them to be optional in our schools. And so, do you want to address the mask issue again for our families, for folks who are watching? And then, if I need to add anything, I can.
Do I want to, or will I?
I'm asking you to.
Okay, I'm happy to do that, Kim. So yeah, I mean, Kim, I think even in the context of that question, helped to illustrate how complicated this is. As a country, we've been divided on this issue of masks. As a school district, we are not willing to engage in the politics associated with masking. I mean, what we have said from the beginning is we started out this year with being in the space of masks being optional. And that was because just 90 days before the school year started, there was a mask mandate in place by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And so as a school district, we have been advised by our legal counsel that you should follow orders by the health department, because in the absence of following that, you open the district up to significant exposure and would be considered grossly negligent and would essentially compromise the governmental immunity of the school district. And so we have not changed our position as it relates to masking. There is a health order out there from the Oakland County Health Department. Now, I recognize that there are some out there that are saying, yes, but the Oakland County Health Department shouldn't or doesn't have the authority to issue that mandate. I also have heard the argument that recently the budget bill that was adopted by the legislature and signed by the governor sort of trumped that the ability of local health departments to even be able to issue mask mandates. I want you to know out there in our listening audience, regardless of where you sit on this, we've asked those questions of our legal counsel, and the continued legal opinion that we receive is that school districts should follow public health mandates from local health departments and state health departments. Now, all that being said, we have three branches of government, and one of the branches is the judicial branch. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if this doesn't appear in the courts, and at that point the courts will need to decide. And if the courts decide that it is unconstitutional or inappropriate for a health department to issue a mandate, then that would change our posture and our position. So that's where we're at right now on the masking issue. Anything to add there,
Thank you,
Kim?
Dr. Slaw. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Slaw. All I would add to that is, as part of the Oakland County Health Order, that order contains language to demonstrate that if our rates of community spread reach a certain point in terms of a low point, that the consideration will be given to lifting the mask mandate. So as you know, Michigan is still one of the states where rates of spread for COVID tend to still be high. And so I anticipate that, until we see some significant declines in terms of community spread, the mask mandate from Oakland County will remain in place. And then, like you said, unless the courts intervene and change that somehow.
No,
So,
I would say, Kim, I'm sorry, two more caveats. One caveat is I know the health department put that order in before the vaccine was available for children ages 5 to 11. And again, I'm not encouraging or suggesting that folks should vaccinate their children ages 5 to 11. That's ultimately up to each individual family to make that decision. But the question is, will that have an impact on the health department as they're making these decisions? I don't know the answer to that. I continue to meet with the health department on a weekly basis. We've continued to ask those questions, and the response that we've gotten from the health department is, at this point, they're not planning to change course or direction. So that's one point. And then the second point I would add is, where there has been flexibility, I have to point out, as a school district, we've used a common sense approach to handling this pandemic. Whereas last year we quarantined anybody who was a close contact within 6 feet. This year we've taken a different stance in terms of quarantines, and we've had very few quarantines at the secondary level, and quarantines at the elementary have really been on a class by class basis, and only after we see a number of students out and missing instruction. So not everybody agrees with that approach or that methodology, but last year we quarantined 4,500 students who missed over 25,000 hours of instruction, and that was very detrimental to kids for a variety of reasons. So I'm sorry, Kim, I had to put that caveat in there.
no need to apologize. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask about, we had a question from one community member who asked about the food choices being offered in our breakfast, and the number of processed foods. We know that we do offer obviously breakfast and lunch, and the USDA has provided funding for school districts to offer free breakfast and lunch to anyone, regardless of need. And so the question is, can we put a heavier emphasis on fresh foods, unprocessed foods? And is there anything that we can do about that? One part of that question asked, when will the access to food for all families end? And that is through the end of this school year. The USDA has made that available. We don't know what it means, obviously, for the 22-23 school year. So I would ask if Dr. Slaw, you might want to just sort of weigh in on that as well.
Sure, certainly, I'm happy to do that. By opening up free breakfasts and lunches for students, what I have learned and what I've been told is that actually has contributed in part to some of the supply chain issues that we are experiencing. There are certainly some challenges in terms of supply chain. I know my kids are tired of eating pizza every day for their school lunches when they take advantage of that opportunity. But I can say that I know our food service department, this is constantly a question that they are working on, and they are for students. But it is an ongoing conversation, and there's absolutely a desire to do more in that space.
Thank you. The next question is about air purifiers. the question is specific to Oxbow Elementary, but I think it may be appropriate to take a broader response to that. The question is, would it be possible to have air purifiers in every room? So I thought if you could just address what we've done from an air purification standpoint. And then, specifically, I know that we've done additional things at buildings that, received upgrades this year.
Right, right. So yeah, that's a great question. Three things associated with this question. One would be, as Kim mentioned, new construction. Two would be uh, original building construction where HVAC units have not been replaced. And then three would be what else on top of those two things. So one, with new construction, with the updated technologies, we are able to accomplish, uh, adding filters that are MERV 13 rated, and those are the highest and best ratings you can get for the filtration systems that you're utilizing in any environment. And so our schools with the new construction, they have those capabilities. They're also seeing increased air exchange sessions per hour. So our original construction, in terms of COVID-19, they recommend you should get at least 4 air exchanges per hour. Every one of our rooms get between 5 and 7 air exchanges, and the new construction gets even better air exchange per hour. As the weather gets cooler and we're closing windows, that's just an important thing to note, that we are meeting that standard that has been suggested in terms of COVID-19. In addition to that, in our larger spaces where we have larger groups of students that can't as easily accomplish social distancing, we have purchased standalone filtration systems that are very high quality. They're about, I think we spent about $100,000 district wide last year, and each unit is about $2,000 per unit. So we're using those, for example, in our cafeterias, perhaps in our vocal music rooms. They're portable. They can be moved. Every elementary building received 2 of those, and I believe we provided more at the secondary level because we have larger spaces. So, those 3 points I think speak to our air quality in classrooms.
Thank you. Again, sort of switching gears a little bit, switching themes. We do have a question about how do we go about improving the playground equipment at Highland Elementary? Again, sort of going back to the bond. And so you may address that, Dr. Slaw, as part of our total bond projects.
So I want to touch on the bond here. I want to talk about furniture. I'm sorry, not furniture, but playground equipment. But I also want to talk about school security related to the bond. So we had in 2014 and 15, Kim, where we had a couple of failed ballot initiatives. So in 2014 and 15, we had a couple failed ballot initiatives. And I just think it's really important to highlight that we're playing almost catch up to an extent as it relates to some of the security enhancements that we're now putting in place as a result of the 2019 bond. So I want to really put the exclamation point on that. Thank you to our community for supporting that 2019 bond. In the absence of that bond, we would not be doing the security enhancements we're doing right now. And frankly, we would be incapable of doing those security enhancements in terms of adding safe and secure entries, in terms of adding cameras throughout our buildings, which also serve as a preventative measure. including improving all of our doors, including adding some of the safety hardware, the night knocks. Is that what it's called, Kim? The knocks tool that you just put your
It's
push
the
on it.
night
Night
lock
lock.
system.
Yes. So that night lock a feature that we're looking at right now and planning to go out for bid on and adding to all of our doors. We wouldn't be able to do those things if it wasn't for the bond passing and the sinking fund. So I want to remind the community, when we went through our pre-bond work, we identified between $400 and $500 million worth of needs, not just security, but parking lots, boilers, chillers, roofs, safety and security, and improving instructional spaces. We passed a bond for 180 million and a sinking fund for about 20 million over a 10-year time period. In order for us to continue to keep our schools safe and implement the most appropriate safety and security technology, we have to continue to support our schools through successful passages of bonds and sinking funds. And as a school district, we have every intention of only coming out to the community when it's at a zero tax rate increase. But it's important. We can't forget why we passed these bonds. So to the second part of that question around playground equipment, we have allocated $125,000 for every elementary school to receive updated and upgraded playground furniture and equipment. We've already bid that out. We've selected a vendor. We've entered into a contract. So at this point, it's really a matter of each elementary school team coming together with their principals, with their PTAs, and with a few teachers from each building, and identifying which equipment they want to select from that menu of items. And then once that equipment is selected, the contractors will come in and begin to make those installations. So again, that as a result of the bond, we can do that. In the absence of the bond, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a break and field the next question. And it's related to COVID. The question is, as cases continue to rise and as we continue to see more classrooms go remote, will the district consider moving the entire district to remote learning? And I can tell you that that's not something we intend to do at this stage. Even with increasing cases, we believe we have the right systems in place to be able to identify and report cases of COVID. When we have had a high number of COVID cases in a classroom, as well as other students out being tested, as well as students being kept home out of a general sense of caution, we have made the decision to move individual classrooms to remote learning. Fortunately, this year we haven't had to move any buildings to fully remote for purposes of COVID. But what I can tell you is, and Dr. Salah said this a number of times last year and has repeated it this year, we believe the best option for learning is face-to-face learning for those families and students who choose that. We do have a virtual option with the Huron Valley Virtual Academy, and so some of our families have chosen that as an option. But what I can tell you is we believe that we are effectively managing those cases that come to us. We can only deal with that information that we receive from parents. So if your child is getting tested for COVID, please keep them home until you know the results of that test. If they test positive, please report that to your school. Again, to reemphasize those protocols, if your child is sick, if we send them home with a letter that says they have symptoms of COVID, you have the opportunity to return with a negative COVID test, and that's got to be a PCR test, or B, an alternative diagnosis from an MD or a DO, or the 10 days from the date of symptom onset. So parents have some options there. If you choose not to have your child tested, that's your option, but that child needs to stay home for the 10 days or come back to school with an alternative diagnosis from a physician. So I just wanted to sort of summarize kind of where we are from a COVID standpoint and how I think that we're managing that. Is it a perfect system? No system is perfect in my mind, but I think that we are effectively managing those cases that we're made aware of. And I know the buildings our buildings are doing a tremendous lift in terms of that work. Our building principals, our office coordinators, our office paras, the COVID coordinators that I work with, they're busy all day, every day. And COVID is a big part of what they're doing. So thank you to our families who have been patient with us on that. Thank you to our families who are keeping kids home when they're sick, because that's the best thing that we can do to keep COVID out of our schools. I would remind folks that we know that a number of the COVID cases that have come to school have been as a result, just like last year, of things happening outside of school. So we know that, parties, Halloween parties, Thanksgiving, the upcoming holidays, um, special occasions when kids are getting together. That's where we're seeing some of the spread. And so, we hear about birthday parties that are happening with lots of kids, and then all of a sudden we have 3 cases as a result in one classroom as a result of the kids, all being together. And I get it. Folks are tired of this pandemic. I know I am. But we can't let our guard down. And that's one of the ways that we help manage it is by just keeping our kids home when they're sick. Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Salah?
No, thank you, Kim.
Next question is for you. I gave you a little bit of a break. And so the next question is for you. There were several questions about what we are doing as a school district to support social and emotional health in our schools for our students. And so I wanted to ask you if you could address how the district is approaching it, what we've done specifically, and plans for the future.
Sure, certainly. So, it it didn't take the pandemic or the recent tragedy for us for us to be having conversations about social emotional. I mean, it is one of our focuses as a school district. Our mission is inspiring building futures one student at a time. And that means that in some instances we have to differentiate supports for students. And so if a student is struggling with something, whatever that may be, then as a school district, we take serious our responsibility of providing that support. A few things, recently lowering our ratio of counselor to students in this last contract, one small example. But I think over the last 3 years, when I just think about the elementary school, elementary level, we've added social work support at every building. Well, actually, that's throughout the district. We've added sensory rooms to help students that might be struggling with anxiety or stress. We've added PBIS para support. We've added 30-day paras. We are always looking at how our counselors, our school psychologists, our social workers are providing supports to buildings. Recently, Kim, you're part of our cabinet team. We spent a lot of time talking about social emotional supports for our youngest learners at the JKK level. We just approved another school psychologist to be hired in order to provide not only some building supports, but also provide some professional learning for for our staff that are in those buildings to help them know and understand, because it really takes every single one of us working together in collaboration and understanding the best practices for supporting children, whether they've experienced trauma, they're struggling coming off the heels of this pandemic, they're struggling with the most recent tragedy that we've seen. Um, there, we could always add more and more and more. And so I guess what I would say is, as a school district, we've done a lot, but we continue to look at our systems and our supports to help every child meeting their needs where they're at. And so that means just continuing to add more. One thing I would ask from our listening audience is, when we look at the way that schools are designed to operate, there are so many things that have continued to be added. Now lots of school districts are adding, school nurses. They're bolstering additional supports around social emotional. Every time we're adding in those positions, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm saying every time we are adding in those positions, it's less that we can do on the academic side. And so my call is to the legislature to get serious about supporting local school districts so that we can do those things and not have to pull dollars or resources out of classrooms to provide social emotional supports, because that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're having to do is we're weighing where we can take a little to put a little. And we need more focused support from the legislature to do that. So I would call on our legislators to help. I mean, specifically, please contact your local senator, Senator Runstead, our House Representative, Representative Maddock. They work every single day in Lansing on our behalf. They have direct influence over their colleagues and how schools are funded. And we should not have to continue to make decisions between, social emotional supports, school nursing supports, and paying more for transportation and some of the basic costs to run a school district when others don't have those same challenges and costs.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. The next question is a question that I will field. So the question is actually, when will all students be trained on ALICE? And so I would just address this by talking about what we have done, even before the tragedy in Oxford. Each year in October, we recognize the third week in October as Safety Week. And during Safety Week, we do presentations for at each grade level, age appropriate for our students in elementary, middle, and high school. In elementary school, we talk about all the ways that we keep students safe, whether it's a weather emergency or a health emergency, or if there's a dangerous person in the building. And at the elementary level, that really stresses, listening to the adults, listening to the instructions of the adults. We practice our drills, so our evacuation drills. We practice our, at the high school, we practice our active shooter drills. At the middle schools, we practice during Safety Week. So, and then we practice all year long. We have a required number of drills that we do throughout the year. That's a compliance piece, and we comply with that. Yesterday, we had an early release day. We spent the day, I spent the day with Milford Police Detective, Detective Dan Caldwell. Some of you know Detective Caldwell. He is a homegrown product and is one of our school resource officers that's assigned to our schools in Milford. And he assisted me in doing refresher training for each of our buildings to talk about our run, hide, fight protocols. ALICE is a common acronym that's used, and Huron Valley Schools did contract with ALICE a little over 3 years ago to help us train in the areas of alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. Since that time, we have transitioned to run, hide, fight, which is the same principles, run, hide, fight, but a more streamlined, simpler approach. It's endorsed by not only our local police agencies, but the Michigan State Police, FEMA, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Department of Education. And what it really does is give options for our staff in the event of an active assailant issue. What we do is we run through those. We did some video learning yesterday, and then the next phase of that is to work within each building to do some scenarios-based training with our staff. And then the next piece of that is to work again with age-appropriate strategies. Obviously, this looks much different at the high school than it does at the elementary level, and then have that learning continue throughout the year. So this isn't a one-hit wonder. This is something we do consistently. We maintain cohesion with the process and the principles. That's principles, PLES. And so this is a commitment and something that's part of our culture, really, the culture of safety in our buildings. So many things that we do, we don't publicize because, we don't want to tell people necessarily the tactics and strategies that we use to keep the building safe. But please know, as a community, that we are committed to this, and we have been for quite some time. It didn't take Oxford for us to commit to safe and secure entries. It didn't take the Oxford tragedy for us to train our staff and to practice our drills. Dr. Salah did mention some of the upgrades that we are considering in terms of the night lock devices. We know that, are being credited for assisting some buildings or assisting at Oxford and potentially saving lives. And we know that with some of our classrooms, the ability to evacuate is limited by lower mobility for some of our students. We know, for example, at the Apollo Center, we have babies at the Apollo Center. And so evacuating babies looks much different than evacuating high school students. So I'm sorry I spent so much time talking about that. Dr. Salah, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Again, I apologize for taking up so much time with that.
I appreciate you walking through that level of detail, though, Kim, because I think it's important for the community to hear that. As a district, it didn't take this tragedy for us to have these conversations. These conversations have certainly been ongoing as long as I have been in the district as superintendent, and certainly not something I would take credit for, because these conversations started before my even being here. But I would add that our staff are not impervious to the emotions that are associated with this most recent tragedy. And I would say that we have new staff in the district as well. So this training never really stops, and it should never stop. And sometimes it becomes easy to sort of relax because there hasn't been a crisis. But I think what we've learned, not only just as recently as the last couple of weeks, but we've sort of known this, is that we can never let up. We really need to continue to scaffold and revisit, and even if someone feels like it's not the most pressing thing on their plate at the moment, we still have to be insistent as a school district, and we are committed to doing that. I think it's also important to note, Kim, that there are some buildings that, while we just did this refresher training, I know Lakeland High School, for example. I'll just use Lakeland in Milford as well. I know, they've already done multiple drills this year regarding armed assailant. And when kids came back, I know our teachers just did an amazing job. Every teacher talking with their classrooms in an age appropriate way about what students should do in their classrooms. But we have some buildings where we're going to actually push in and do even more training because there might be newer staff there, and they just need that level of support. And that will always be the case. We will always do that, and we are committed to that level of support for our buildings.
Thank you again. So one of the questions here is, are the consequences of those students who have been arrested for the threats made to Huron Valley schools, are we communicating what the consequences are? And I would say, I know we have communicated in our letters to families when both on Friday as well as on Sunday, when law enforcement has made us aware that there are arrests. The other part of that question was how we communicate that to the students. We certainly have encouraged families to communicate that to students in our communications. So, when we're telling moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and other guardians about those consequences, we're hoping those are conversations that are happening at home. In other words, if I still had kids in school, I would be sharing those letters, and I would be saying, this is what happens. Don't think that you can make a threat like this and not face consequences, because you could face both criminal consequences as well as consequences leading up to expulsion, as you talked about before, Dr. Salah. So, we're encouraging those conversations to happen at home. But I know that kids also talk to each other. And so they know, and these conversations are happening at school regarding the outcomes from these copycat threats that have been made. I wanted to just have Dr. Slot, if you could address, so there is a question regarding how HVS handles LGBTQ issues. If you could touch on that very quickly, because we have about a little over 10 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting question. The phrasing of that question is interesting as well. I would say, specifically, Huron Valley Schools does not tell students who they are, how they should feel, what they should think. We are an educational organization. Our mission, as I mentioned, is inspiring and building futures one student at a time. So I will tell you, the way I think about every student is, if they are feeling marginalized for any reason whatsoever, that is impeding their ability to learn. And as a school district, it is our responsibility to help students that are feeling marginalized for whatever reason that is, to help them overcome so that they can be successful, that their needs can be met from a social emotional perspective, that they can feel safe in school, that they can learn in school, that they can graduate from our schools and be successful contributing members of society. We don't push anything, in terms of gender identity or anything along those lines. Students come to us as who they are. And so I think, that's just important to say, that we're here for all of our kids.
Thank you for that. What can you tell us, what progress has been made from the board / parent task force? Can you speak to that? I know that there have been a few meetings that have occurred, and maybe
Yeah.
you can sort of give us an update on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure, Mr. Carlson would appreciate that this question was posed. Our board has really been intentional about opening up dialogue and discourse with the community. I can tell you, I don't know of any other local community, frankly, that has done as much as we are doing to be out there, to be transparent, to answer people's questions, and to just be as honest as and direct as we possibly can. I think these coffee hours are one example of that we've been doing for the last 2 years. We implemented a superintendent parent group, and that's been great. And this year, Mr. Carlson has instituted two actually platforms that I think has been really quite successful. One has been these community connection forums where the board quarterly has made themselves available at different locations throughout the district. And it's just been drop-in. Community can drop in and have one-on-one conversations with board members, and board members can take their feedback, share their own perspectives and opinions as one individual on the Board of Education. And I think that's been really helpful to helping us bridge last year. And then most recently, this task force, which has a representative from all of our buildings. It has some teachers on the group. It has some principals on the group, and it's being facilitated by an individual who's a third party who's been working with the district. So the focus on that task force has been around program enhancements, how we think about this new economy that we're growing into, and then social emotional well-being of students as we move out of this pandemic. And I will tell you, we've spent the lion's share of those conversations on the social emotional pieces, just because that's where the task force has really felt we needed to spend this most time up front. So I applaud the Board of Education for its forethought and really putting this out there and putting themselves out there. And I think that the conversations through the task force has been really helpful. This most recent task force meeting was Monday, and we sort of shifted gears a little bit. Rather than just continuing on with business as usual, we spent some time processing what happened in Oxford and just really thinking about our own practices as a school district and how we move out of that most recent tragedy. So that's where we're at so far. I see some good things coming out of that. I can tell you, as a school district, we've already started thinking about a parent night in the second semester to help support parents with social emotional, bringing in a keynote speaker, offering breakout sessions. I can tell you that, the conversations around adding an additional school psychologist at the elementary level is part of an offshoot of some of the feedback we've heard from the task force. So it's informing our decisions as a school district, even as we go through the process.
Thank you, Dr. Slaw. I have a question again that I will field. So some neighboring school districts are starting to enforce or consider clear backpacks or bags for students in their schools. Has HVS thought about such a policy? So I will touch on a couple of things, because I also got a question about metal detectors. So we have a meeting tomorrow with our secondary principals, and a number of these questions have actually come up as part of our refresher training with our staff. So we will be looking at, students' use of backpacks, their ability to have them during the day. Do clear backpacks make sense? We know that metal detectors, that has been a common theme, common question since the Oxford situation. Metal detectors are extremely expensive, we would have to have staff trained to do them, to run them and be able to run and effectuate the policies associated with them. We also know that folks who are intent on doing harm have ways to get around metal detectors. Um, I think about how the minutes we took up in terms of just being able to do take temperatures when we were trying to take every student's temperature at the high school and how long that process took. And we're really relying on law enforcement to talk to us about best practices. And they do not see metal detectors as a best practice for public schools. So as we have conversations about what policies, procedures, and expectations we put in place, we're going to be vetting those with our local law enforcement agencies, as well as, the Michigan State Police and national agencies that give us recommendations for school security. So I just wanted to touch on that issue. It's the clear backpack question is certainly something that we would at least put on the table with our building principals and have that conversation. Dr. Sla, I'm not sure if you want to say anything else about that. We're at 7:27 right now. You can address that or give us some final thoughts if you'd like, but we are close to wrapping up.
No, I thank you for addressing that question, Kim. I know it's something we've heard, a few times over the last week or so. One thing you didn't touch on is just the psychological impact of having to walk through a metal detector every single day. There's actually, literature out there and studies that have been conducted. We're talking about socially emotional, talk about creating anxiety and stress. So it's just another point to add there. Just in closing, we want to thank you for joining us. I mean, at one point, I think we had about 150 people on the YouTube channel watching, and as always, we are so grateful for our individuals that reached out and asked the questions. It gives us an opportunity to provide our best thinking as of right now, and I recognize that not everybody agrees with every single response to some of these questions. But we, as a school district, as your superintendent, I'll tell you, I feel like transparency and just answering the question directly is always our best course of action. There's no sense in trying to get around the questions. They're going to get asked and they need to be answered, and so we're committed to doing that. And I just want to take a moment and wish you all a happy holiday. If I don't see you between now and the end of next week, I really look forward to spending some time with my family. We do celebrate the Christmas holiday, so it's always a time for my family to rest and rejuvenate and refresh, and I get some time with my parents and my wife's parents, and so it's always just a great holiday. So I just want to wish you all happy holidays, regardless of what you celebrate, and I hope you take some time and really sort of de-stress and reflect and unpack. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. And I would only add to that, those sentiments that I just wanted to give a shout out, if I could, before we close, to our law enforcement agencies. This has been quite a week since Oxford occurred, the violence in Oxford occurred. And then subsequently those copycat threats made to our district. I get the absolute fortune of working closely with our law enforcement agencies, including White Lake PD, the Oakland County Sheriff's Department, and Milford PD. And we just have top-notch people supporting us every day in Huron Valley Schools. And I'm extremely grateful for those partnerships. And I would just echo what Dr. Salah said in terms of happy holidays. I get to spend them with kids and grandkids, and that's actually the best part is grandkids. I joke often that grandkids are the reward for living through those teenage years with your own kids. So I get to take full advantage of that reward this year. Thanks, everyone.